Hello, good evening, and thanks for being with us tonight here on the Hill at this hour. The partial government shutdown stopped, but the funding fight continues. The president putting pen to paper to reopen the government while teeing up a new battle over ICE, plus the continuing mystery in Tucson. Detectives frantically searching for Savannah Guthrie's elderly mother. Now TMZ says that it received a ransom note. President Trump in the Oval Office here this afternoon.
I'm going to call her later on. I think it's a terrible thing. I always got along very good with Savannah. Very unusual situation, but we're going to find out.
Also happening tonight, Iran escalating, the military having to shoot down a drone that buzzed a battleship. What we are learning about that scene over the high seas, and air of uncertainty. 3 years after those toxic plumes smothered East Palestine, Ohio. What NewsNation is learning tonight about the air those residents still breathe. But first tonight, here from the Hill, the funding fight that is just getting started. With a stroke of a pen, late this afternoon, President Trump signing the bill to fund roughly 96% of the federal government through September, about 96%. But that final 4% is a really big one. The Department of Homeland Security only funded now for 2 weeks. Democrats want reforms. And the top Republican in the Senate says it's President Trump and Chuck Schumer who will now try to hammer out a deal. Republican Congressman Ralph Norman is here in a moment on the battle that is heating up in Congress. But first, live to our Joe Khalil up on Capitol Hill. And Joe, now the question becomes, can both sides agree on potential reforms to DHS?
Yeah, and that's going to be the challenge. You know, ironically, Blake, it was a lot of arm twisting just to pass the funding bill today, but that was the easy part because now Congress has exactly 10 days to work out some kind of negotiation, some kind of long-term funding for Homeland Security, which is going to mean reforms to ICE. Now, Democrats' list of demands seems to grow depending on who you ask and depending on the day. The basics have stayed the same, though, and they want to see things like no more roving patrols, no more masks on ICE agents. They want body cameras worn all the time. One use of force policy, just like local and state. And they want warrants for ICE to come from a judge rather than from an administrative path. Now, what we've heard from Speaker Johnson today is if Republicans are going to give on any of those, then he says Republicans are going to need to see sanctuary cities end some of their sanctuary policies. We talked to perhaps two of the most moderate people in the House, Brian Fitzpatrick, a Republican, Henry Cuellar, a Democrat. Both of them seem to think there is a path forward here. Take a listen.
But I think we ought to be encouraging federal and local cooperation, you know, because I'm an FBI agent my whole career. Yeah. You got to work together as a team, you know, and when there's any kind of block or, you know, preventative measures from, you know, not allowing that to happen, it makes everybody less safe.
There's ways if you just look at what the current law is, what the current statute is, what the current policy is, and I think we can get there.
Blake, Speaker Johnson seems optimistic. He pointed out that Kristi Noem has already talked about implementing things like body cameras and potentially even curbing how many officers are doing these roving patrols. So there could be at least the beginning of progress toward some kind of a middle ground there.
Joe Kay, live for us, Capitol Hallways tonight. Joe, thank you. With us now, Ralph Norman, congressman from South Carolina, who voted in favor of passing the funding bill today, member of the House Freedom Caucus as well. Congressman, thanks for being back with us tonight here on the Hill. So you called this idea of sort of carving out DHS and dealing with it later ludicrous at one point. 21 of your colleagues there in the House voted against this, but you voted for it. Why?
Well, I think at the end of the day, keeping the government open in 10 days is, I didn't like it to separate DHS because what's going to change? I think the Democrats all along want to have these demands that other than the, you know, body cams, which I think is a good idea, and I think Director Noem likes. But when they start saying when, where, and when people can go in people's houses, when they start saying that they name it roaming patrols. Bottom line is that the ICE has got to do their job. They're getting criminals off the streets of Minnesota.
I have you as a yes there, Congressman, for body cams. Are you a yes on anything else? I just heard a couple no's.
You know, the devil's in the details. We'll see, but they've got to be able to do their job. And what's going to happen, that the other side is going to have to stop advocating for the police to fight the ICE agents. They're going to have to let the ICE agents see the criminals that are in the jail. They're going to have to stop the rhetoric that's just inciting the violence against ICE agents who are simply doing their job. And they have families too. They have wives and children. And wearing a mask, I think, is for their own protection. So I would not go along with that, taking the mask off.
Here's something that stood out to me today. We heard from both Leader Thune in the Senate, the top Republican, Chuck Schumer as well in the House. Let's roll it. We'll pick it up on the other side.
Those discussions will get underway. Katie Britt will lead that on our side, but ultimately that's going to be a conversation between the President of the United States and the Democrats here in the Senate.
Leader Thune has to and should be part of these negotiations, and we're going to present a serious proposal, detailed along the outlines of what we have talked about to the Republicans.
Sounds like there, Congressman, that this is going to be negotiated by President Trump and Chuck Schumer. You're in the House. I just sort of left that out of the equation there. Are you comfortable with that?
Well, absolutely. President Trump's record of negotiating is good. I mean, I trust his judgment. I trust he will make a good deal that's good for the American people and good for for those who are trying to do a job to keep them safe. So yes, I have all the confidence in the world, and is one of I guess the main reason that I voted to move the bill forward and give the 10 days to negotiate, the specifics of how ICE is dealt with and how and what they mean by reining it in. They've got to do their job, and the thing about it, the American people are with them. The American people want safety. They want criminals off the streets. And so hopefully the Democrats will recognize that. And if they don't, then I guess they'll have to do what they feel like they need to do.
Let me leave you with this. 10 days from now, is there a deal or no?
I think there will be.
Okay, confident. We'll leave it there. Ralph Norman, Republican, South Carolina. By the way, a survey from the Police Executive Research Forum showed that 82% of agencies had at least one body camera worn on them in the field in 2023, once you consider the conversation around body cams. Congressman, thanks for being with us tonight here on the Hill. Also this evening, of course, we continue to follow. The race is on to find who kidnapped the NBC anchor Savannah Guthrie's 84-year-old mother. Tonight, there are no suspects, no public video that law enforcement has released, and TMZ is saying that it has received a possible ransom note. Just moments ago, at the White House, the president weighed in, sharing his sentiment regarding Savannah Guthrie's mother.
I'm going to call her later on. I think it's a terrible thing. I always got along very good with Savannah. Very unusual situation, but we're going to find out.
Our Brian Enton live for us tonight, Tucson, Arizona, where, Brian, we know that the Border Patrol's most elite unit is now even assisting in this search.
Yeah, as President Trump said, it's unusual. It continues to get more and more mysterious each day. The Border Patrol was assisting with the search. They've got these highly skilled dogs, these scent dogs. And we still do not know where Nancy Guthrie is. A few new developments that we've just learned about, Blake. First of all, we can report that there are signs of forced entry inside of the house. Also, you mentioned the ransom notes. We know that there is an alleged ransom note that went to TMZ. There is also another alleged ransom note that went to a local TV affiliate here in Tucson. I say alleged because we just don't know if they're real. I mean, are these just people trying to make money, sick people trying to make money off this whole thing? Also new, look at this video right here, Blake. This is new. This is the front door. This is Nancy's front door, and you can see there is very clearly blood there at the front doorstep right outside. What does this mean? We don't know. Also, look at this, Blake. The Ring camera is missing. You see the Ring mount there next to the door, but the camera is missing. I asked the sheriff about that at the press conference earlier, and he said they were aware of that and that was something they were looking into. And I said, well, is it the perpetrator who grabbed the Ring camera? And he wouldn't say. He said that they are continuing to investigate. Blake?
Brian, what's that community like, that street like around you? Because at this point, there's not surveillance video or Ring video or anything that police have or law enforcement have put out there. So from where you're standing, I wonder if you can sort of give us a perspective of a look down the road there, or what it's like.
Yeah, it sort of has a rural vibe to it. We have some drone video, I think. We actually just got drone video a little while ago that hopefully we can pull up and I can show you, because it kind of gives you a lay of the land. It's somewhat of a rural area. It's not like a typical neighborhood where there it is right there. You see this, Blake? Each house is on a couple of acres, 1, 2, 3 acres. There's no street lights out here at night. It's very, very dark. So it's not like a neighborhood where neighbors would necessarily see what's happening in their neighbor's yard. And then you can see the mountains in the distance. And Mexico, by the way, is only like 60 miles away. So It's a desolate area. It seems like it'd be a somewhat easy area to get in and out of, especially because there are some cameras, but there's not that many cameras.
Brian Ensign, Tucson, Arizona for us tonight. I'm sure we'll speak to him in the coming days. Brian, thank you. With us now, Tracy Walder, NewsNation national security contributor, former CIA agent, former FBI special agent as well. Tracy, thanks for being here tonight as we follow this story and hope for the best there out of Arizona. The TMZ reported this afternoon of a basically ransom email that they got, and you just heard Brian there talk about another local television station getting apparently something similar. How do you know if any of that is legitimate potentially, or just people trying to take advantage of an awful situation?
Well, thank you so much for having me, Blake. Yes, this is incredibly sad. So one of the things they're probably going to do is trace the email of origin. So where did it come from? TMZ has stated that the Bitcoin address where they are asking for it to be deposited in is real. That doesn't necessarily confirm the validity of it. It's more about where it came from. And so the FBI is assisting technically with a lot of their technological capabilities. And so they are no doubt trying to trace the IP of that. It's probably going to be difficult. I don't think it's going to be a slam dunk. It's probably going to take a day or two, but they should be able to confirm it that way. So
Brian just showed you there, the missing Ring camera. The Border Patrol's elite unit is involved right now. The police there, the law enforcement, I'm sure if they had it, they'd put it out, but they haven't put out any sort of suspect identification or video. When you put all of that together, Tracy, where do investigators go from here?
So I have to be honest, Blake, I'm not sure that they would put out video if they had it. It depends on where they are in the investigation.
So where do you think they are?
So if they're closing in on a suspect, they may not want the suspect's face out there because they don't necessarily want this person knowing that they're closing in. It makes it much more difficult, obviously, for them to be able to get them. Now, in terms of where they are in this investigation, they have released the crime scene. As Brian mentioned, he was able to essentially get up to the front door. So they're done processing that. It seems to me like they're turning their attention to a very wide radius that does include the border. As Brian mentioned, it's just about an hour away. So I think that they may have an idea of motive at this point, and hopefully the motive is going to lead them to the perpetrator.
How significant is it that they brought in the Border Patrol's most elite unit for this, Tracy?
So in my opinion, I do think it's significant. Obviously, it's incredibly sad because I think it makes the search, in my opinion, that much more difficult. I think what they are assuming is, obviously, we know now that she was taken against her will and that she may have been brought across the border. It is a very quick trip to there. So the fact that they brought them in does tell me that they have a concern that the radius of this may expand into Mexico.
Law enforcement, of course, putting out there tonight, if you know anything, they are asking the public for any sort of information, for any sort of help out there in Tucson, Arizona this evening. Tracy Walder, NewsNation contributor, with us tonight. Tracy, thank you.
Thank you, Blake.
Well, still to come tonight here on The Hill, new fears that the contamination 3 years later after the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, only getting worse. NewsNation just speaking to people who are living through it.
Every single person that I love starts to come down with illnesses that they did not have prior to this derailment.
Plus, a U.S. fighter jet takes aim at an Iranian drone. The latest tensions with Iran when we report later this evening. And let the games begin. You see the 6 lucky American cities hosting matches for the most popular sport in the world and the 2028 Olympic Games. I know people are interested in what's about to come here in a couple days, but we just found out where in America we'll get the Olympics in 28. I'm Blake Burman. Other side. I'll see you then. 4 minutes.
I just had radiation treatment for my back.
All of us have anxiety levels that we never had before.
The stress and worry about watching your loved one go through an illness.
I have trouble with headaches every day.
I think what the problem is here is that we're still sitting in this contamination.
Studying us in this environment is no different than putting us inside a house fire, watching through the door and seeing what a house fire does to the human body.
NewsNation on the ground, still East Palestine, Ohio, where families say they are paying the price 3 years later after that hazardous train derailment there. And tonight, a new warning as independent tests reveal the contamination is apparently getting worse. This is members of Congress gathered today to repeat their calls to pass legislation aimed at addressing safety for trains transporting hazardous materials.
For me, the 3 years of inaction from the Congress remains unacceptable.
Every single week of the year, there's a derailment. We only heard about East Palestine because we had all these chemicals on it.
Our transportation systems and supply chains need a healthy rail system.
You won't find anyone else who's covered this story more since day one than our Rich McHugh, who is live once again in East Palestine, Ohio tonight with the latest there. Hello, Rich.
Hi, Blake. So we have a couple headlines here. We have an independent testing expert who's come forward and a retired EPA, a longtime EPA expert, 38 years he spent in the EPA, saying the situation here is worse than it was 3 years ago. That's when the train derailed in that horrific derailment. And officials made that dire decision to burn 5 tank cars full of vinyl chloride over East Palestine and this entire region. Independent scientist Scott Smith says his testing has found dioxin levels and creek contamination not improving, but showing the toxins are now worse. And retired longtime EPA expert Dr. Kevin Garahan, he's blowing the whistle on the EPA. He says the EPA didn't do extensive monitoring of chemicals released after the burn. They didn't aggressively monitor for dioxins. Those are the most carcinogenic compounds that are created when these toxins mix. And they tried to smear the work of independent scientists like Smith. Garahan filed a complaint with his former colleagues about the handling of the derailment and was ignored. He says it's time for the EPA to own up to its mistakes, and says by classifying East Palestine as one of the worst contaminated places in the country, the EPA can get federal funding and implement more cleanup options.
I would strongly recommend that East Palestine be considered for inclusion on the national priorities list of sites. There's a lot of contamination. You have extremely toxic chemicals that are present. They are showing up in the environment, and there are exposure pathways that could harm community members.
Now, we've reached out to the EPA, Blake, for comment. They have not yet responded. As you heard from many of those community members, they are reeling here. They say they need federal help, and they have not received any of it. Back to you.
Rich McHugh on the scene 3 years later tonight. Rich, thank you. And consider this, with the backdrop there of Rich's reporting. In total, about 175,000 tons of contaminated soil, that's more than 350 million pounds, have been excavated and shipped out of East Palestine for disposal. Well, still to come tonight here on the Hill, the U.S., the F-35s shoot down an Iranian drone. What Iran did next, that got the U.S. destroyer to become involved in what President Trump is saying tonight, plus back in court. Testimony still underway in Utah as the defense team for the suspect in the shooting of the conservative activist Charlie Kirk attempts to get the prosecution thrown off the case. Bottom of the hour, some of the top stories coming into our newsroom tonight, and there is breaking news out of the Middle East as the escalation continues with Iran. The U.S. military now saying it has shot down an Iranian drone that was aggressively approaching the USS Abraham Lincoln. This was about 500 miles off Iran's coast. Officials say an F-35 fighter jet, like the ones you see here, eliminated the drone in self-defense. No U.S. forces harmed, no vessels damaged. But that's not all. Hours later, in the consequential Strait of Hormuz, Iran's military forces harassed a U.S. crew vessel, leading a U.S. missile destroyer and Air Force jets to swarm in and escort that crew to safety. Both incidents tonight continue to underscore the growing tensions in the region, with scheduled talks between the two countries ahead. Our Kelly Meyer live for us tonight at the White House. Kelly, President Trump asked today about those meetings, suggested that they could come in the coming days, but then we see this.
Yeah, that's right, Blake. And like you said, this is all against the backdrop of those ongoing negotiations with Iran on a nuclear agreement. But a source familiar with the discussions telling me tonight that the Iranians want the talks moved from Turkey to Oman. Iran also wants the talks only with the U.S., not with several other Arab and Muslim countries as observers there. And the president has been trying to reach a deal with Iran since last year when negotiations broke down last summer. The U.S. struck 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities. And today, President Trump warned something like that could happen again.
We did Midnight Hammer. I don't think they want that happening again, but they would like to negotiate. We are negotiating with them right now, yes.
This all as deadly protests against Iran's regime continue. Video of widespread violence is spreading across social media, with the number killed unverified but said to be over 10,000. And the White House press secretary saying today that there is hope for a diplomatic solution, though the president has a range of options on the table with the USS Lincoln now in position. Blake.
Kelly Meyer, live for us at 1600 tonight. Kelly, thank you. Our partners at The Hill reporting on President Trump clarifying his recent comments about nationalizing U.S. elections, in particular, the role cities and states play in counting the votes.
These are agents of the federal government to count the votes. If they can't count the votes legally and honestly, then somebody else should take over.
So President Trump commenting when asked about the topic of nationalizing elections, Democrats, including Senator Mark Warner, had heavily criticized the president's comments.
This threat to our election security, the basic premise of our democracy, is forward-looking to 2026 and to 2028, and candidly to the institutions that safeguard our democracy.
Now, the White House today argued that the president is referring to the SAVE Act, which is a piece of legislation that would require voter ID. Last year, Pew Research polling found that 83% of Americans favor photo ID to vote. Happening now in Utah. This comes from our Nexstar affiliate, KTVX. 22-year-old Tyler Robinson is back in court as his team, as the defense team, tries to get the prosecution thrown off the case. Robinson, of course, is accused in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. The defense claims a conflict of interest because one of the prosecutor's adult children attended the event at Utah State University where Kirk was murdered. An allegation the prosecution denies. This comes as Kirk's widow, Erica, has asked that all ongoing legal proceedings be made to the public. And from our affiliate KLAS in Las Vegas, brand new video shows this moment that FBI agents raided a suspected illegal biolab. And tonight, it could serve as a warning no matter where you live in the country. Investigators discovering several vials with unidentified liquids. And now we're learning that this lab right here might be connected to another lab that was busted a few years ago in California. That incident led to a congressional investigation because the owner believed to be tied to the Chinese Communist Party. In that case, Congress found materials like HIV, SARS, and E. coli viruses that, if released, could pose a health risk.
The operation had ties to the Chinese ownership and funding, raised alarm about foreign adversaries exploiting weaknesses in the U.S.
Nicole Ziba is the city manager there in Reedley, California. That's just south and east of Fresno, where that first lab was discovered. Nicole, thanks for being with us tonight. So you had this incident in your backyard. Press conference on it today because of what was discovered not too far away in Las Vegas, Nevada this evening. Tell me why you're concerned and why you think the American public needs to know about this.
Oh, the American public definitely needs to be brought up to speed. You know, we discovered our own House of Horrors back in December of 2022. Took us months to get our House of Horrors abated. Vials of deadly diseases, chemicals, hazards, etc. We tried to raise the red flag then about loopholes in national law. And Congressman Costa tried to run a bill back then that would close some of these loopholes. Didn't go anywhere. And now we find Vegas may be connected to the same person who had the Reedley lab.
Yeah, it was the house, the person who's connected to the lab where you are owns the house in Vegas, and that's why you had federal officials there storming this thing.
Right. Storming in Vegas. They also issued a search warrant in Reedley again this weekend. So we're sort of back at it with this situation here in Reedley.
What does Congress need to do here? Because I'm looking, for example, in Reedley where you are, and that initial incident, it's next to a park, it's next to schools, it's next to a fire station, sort of everyday places. There you go, the library, a local church, you see it there. What's your message to Washington tonight?
I hope every single congressperson realizes that something like this could be in their district, right next to elementary schools, right next to the public water system, like in our case. So right now, the loophole for owning certain agents, you can own certain agents. You can't own select agents, but others are okay, other pathogens. And so they really need to close that loophole if they want to keep this country safe from biological hazards.
So what does the FBI need to do? Because the FBI was involved in your case. I should note to our audience here on News Nation and those listening to us on SiriusXM, the China Select Committee, which is like the most bipartisan committee here in Washington that you will find, investigated what happened in your backyard because they thought, of course, this was obviously a big deal. They said the GAPs are allowed a wanted fugitive from Canada who is a PRC national who had previously stolen millions of dollars of American intellectual property to operate an illegal facility that contained thousands of vials of potential infectious agents. So they investigated that and Congress got involved. But now this second house, what does the FBI need to do?
Well, you know, the FBI did not assist us mainly through ours. So we were on our own from about week 2 on. The Congressional Investigative Committee put that report together, and it's critical that the public really knows what's happening out there. That report is public, and I would advise everyone to go read that. And so I do hope the FBI is looking into all of the connections, particularly the ones that we made back in 2023 that included Vegas.
It is the big story out in Las Vegas tonight, same in the Fresno, California area. Nicole Ziba, the city manager there, with us tonight here on the Hill. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Of course, still to come, striking a deal. I'm talking about Bill and Hillary Clinton. They just cut a deal with House Republicans over the Epstein probe. So did the Republican chairman get what he wanted, or did the Clintons get what they were looking for? And a live look at Milan. Ooh, what was that? Was that lightning or something? What is that out there in the skies? Either way, the Olympics building with excitement there. We're going to tell you here on the Hill why you should be excited for 2028. Brand new cities, potentially the Olympics coming to your backyard. We'll explain when we return.
Bill O'Reilly on Cuomo.
I kind of lift this whole enterprise up like hot gas.
TV's liveliest, most honest debate.
You should be thankful for me, Cuomo.
Oh, God. Tomorrow at 8, 7 Central, only on News Nation.
We have a secure border, and for 9 months, I have said nobody has come into it. It is a strong, great border. It's beautiful to see. Even if you go down, you know, some of you, I think, were down there a couple of weeks ago, and you couldn't believe it, right?
All right, so President Trump today was asked about DHS reforms. What reforms do you want to see now that the government's back open and there's going to be 10 days of negotiations to try to figure out what to do with the Department of Homeland Security? And as you heard there, that was his answer. Border, border, and more border. Full panel here with me now. Daniela Diaz, congressional reporter at the digital news outlet Notice. Look who's back with us. Hogan Gidley, special advisor to the House Speaker Mike Johnson, and Kurt Bardella, Democratic strategist, News Nation contributor. Hello to you both. Thanks for being here. Daniela, nice to see you. Busy day for you. Busy day for you. Let me start with you, though, because there was this deal, and the government's back open, 96% of it. But the other 4% is what they're going to be arguing on for the next 2 weeks.
And the 4% is probably the most contentious part of them negotiating on appropriations. I mean, it's always a Democrat and Republican debate about how to handle immigration, how to handle, well, Democrats say immigration system, Republicans say border security. So they're already on a different path when it comes to that issue. They have 10 days. They have Democrats, the House, separate from the Senate, have different lists of demands. That's already one issue. The House Democrats want to go a little farther with their demands, have more demands for the Senate. It's going to be a really messy 10 days. They're leaving town tomorrow after votes. It's unclear whether these 10 days, Hogan will know much more than I will as a man very educated on this, what can actually be done? I mean, when do we see Democrats and Republicans really negotiate well on these things?
So, do you think there's going to be a deal in 10 days?
Maybe.
Maybe. I played that soundbite from the president, Hogan, because President Trump was asked today about what reforms you want to see, and it was border, border, border. And he's trying to reframe the argument, not about immigration, not about ICE, not about DHS, but about the border. Can he?
I think so, but that's going to take yeoman's work from a lot of the members in Congress and on the Senate side going back to their districts to have these conversations because, look, I think the national media has done a really horrible job showing all sides of this issue, instead going for the glitzy, glamorous things, the sad images you're seeing from Minneapolis, all over Minnesota, instead of focusing on the victims of these violent crimes across this country, including in Minnesota. And for the life of me, I can't understand why all of these other states where they're deporting infinitely more people than Minnesota, it's only that state that tends to have the problems. That's a big issue, too. But this will be the fight moving forward because I don't think they're even close on what they're going to do with DHS funding.
So that's the argument from this side, from his side of the aisle, Kurt.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot will depend on what the temperature is like when these members leave tomorrow, go back to their district. What's the feedback in their district? What are the constituents saying? Like, remember, this is a midterm election year. What goes on in your backyard carries way more weight than whatever's playing out in the national media, what plays out in D.C. If the feedback is negative, if the political environment is turning a little bit on immigration against the president, that's going to carry more weight to get some more negotiating power for Democrats. If the mood back home is, you know, we're still with the president on immigration enforcement, we're still with these tactics, then there's going to be no room to negotiate on the Republican side. So it just depends on what the feedback is back home.
So here was Ralph Norman, a Republican from South Carolina, earlier on the show tonight.
I think the Democrats all along want to have these demands that other than the, body cams, which I think is a good idea, and I think Director Noem likes. But when they start saying where and when people can go in people's houses, when they start saying that they name it roaming patrols, bottom line is that the ICE has got to do their job.
So that's the division. And then the question is, how do they get there if, as Hogan says, not even close?
What I found on Capitol Hill, Hogan knows this, it tends to be the more moderate members on each side that come together and negotiate on something. We're hearing the more leftist Democrats talk about abolishing ICE. That conversation isn't going to help in negotiations in the next 10 days. And some of them are very headstrong about that. Talk about the Congressional Progressive Caucus. So it's also important to note that the top Democrat who's negotiating on DHS is a moderate Congressman Henry Cuellar, who I saw on your show earlier today talk about what he wants to see in DHS funding. So it's going to be those folks who negotiate on this. But again, it's going to be tough. Hogan said it. He knows.
Yeah, and the Congressman just mentioned body cameras, something that Kristi Noem has already done, so that's in place. But this whole notion that somehow they need to take their masks off. First of all, it's -60 in Minnesota, so let's be clear, you need to cover your face. But second of all, with 8,000% increase in death threats on ICE agents, a systematic, coordinated effort throughout Minneapolis to dox these ICE agents, these brave men and women.
The public is against you, though, as you know, on the polling here.
Maybe now, but I'm saying once this thing begins to have the conversation out in the public and you get to see the other side of it, then it's a whole other question. And by the way, I thought Democrats were the party of masks, so I'm very confused. You need to pick a lane. But also, I think it's also there's a step too far, 2 steps too far, and one of those is abolishing ICE. If they keep doing that, I think they're in big trouble. And then second is, it's really trying to do a backdoor amnesty, another shell game, trying to do judicial warrants or whatever. That's never going to happen in our non-starters on the right.
How far should your party push?
I think they should get what they get, which is better than nothing, and then live to fight another day. And whatever they don't get, if they feel that strongly about it, use it in the campaign, use it in the midterms. Say, like, listen, if you put us in office, this is going to be part of our agenda. If you believe that strongly, and if you think the American people are with you, that's the case that you make.
All right, other story tonight, big one. The Clintons are going to be testifying up. What was that? Oh, that was a fist pump from Hogan. Going to be testifying up on Capitol Hill. Here was the chairman of the House Oversight Committee. This relates to the Epstein files, James Comer, earlier today.
The contempt motion is still on the table. The contempt of Congress is for failing to show up. This will be their 3rd date that we've given the Clintons, and 3 strikes and you're out.
A spokesperson for the Clintons at the 11th hour, James Comer, asked for a camera. That's fine. He can have 1,000 cameras. The Clintons will do this publicly. Kurt, you were on that committee working for it for 5 years. Tell me what this means.
So really what's going to happen is the Clintons have agreed to comply with the original subpoena, which called for a deposition. That will happen behind closed doors. There will be a transcribed interview. There will be a camera recording that deposition. This is not a public hearing. This is not going to be one of those shows where every member gets their 2 minutes and 5 minutes and asks questions and they argue back and forth in camera. That's not how this plays out. The Clintons have asked for a public hearing. They have said, hey, we want to do this and we'll do it in public. The chairman has said, no, that's not what we're going to do. The subpoena was for a deposition. That's what's going to happen on February 27th. 28th.
This is very interesting. We've seen Democrats and Republicans, it's been a bipartisan issue to talk about what's happened in these Epstein files. We saw 3 million files come out to the public on Friday. It's really important to have both sides, even though President Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton are Democrats. We see Republicans, President Donald Trump mentioned in the files. Everyone needs to talk about what's in these files. They need to testify, and they need to talk to Congress.
Democrats voted for this to happen, too, as well. I mean, they would hold them in contempt as well.
President Trump was asked about the Clintons testifying, who he used to be friends with, of course. Here was his reaction today in the Oval.
Mr. President, today we heard that the Clintons set deposition dates to testify before the House Oversight Committee. Any reaction to that related to the Epstein question?
I think it's a shame, to be honest. I always liked them, and I shouldn't feel this way, but I feel badly that they have to go through that.
Are Julia Manchester asking the question to your old boss there? Yes. What do you make of that?
Well,
because there's a lot of people who aren't laughing about the president and the files and all of that.
No, of course not. And look, there were unspeakable evils done to several young girls that we need to get to the bottom of, no question about it. But it's because of this Trump administration and because of Republican Congress that now this information is coming out. I'm glad the Clintons are going to do this deposition, have these this closed-door, on-camera interview, and I'm hoping now, in the last, 30, 40 years that he was president. When was he president? How many years ago was that?
A while ago.
A while ago, so 93. Let's hope he has now learned the definition of is. And then we'll be in a much better spot.
Well, I think that the president is speaking from a person who knows that if Democrats take back Congress, the Oversight Committee has already said, the Democrats have said, if we get the subpoena power back, he's going to get asked to testify about this.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Still to come here on the Hill. The Winter Games, they're set to get underway there in Italy. But how about this? We've got the games in 2028. And as we take a live look there in Italy, the Olympics are in Los Angeles. Yes and no, why it might be coming to your backyard on the other side. All right, a live look. This is Milan, Italy tonight. I said earlier, I was like, what's flashing? Duh, it was the red lights. But we're showing it to you as it's 1 a.m. local time there because, of course, just 3 days from the opening ceremonies of the 2026 Winter Olympics. And while we look forward to that, how about this tonight? Back here in the good old USA. Closer to home, the U.S. is going to host the 2028 Summer Games. As you might know, they're in Los Angeles. But We learned today that we and you just might be closer to the games than you thought, because in addition to LA, both men's and women's Olympic soccer will kick off with games in Columbus, Ohio. How about that? That's where they're going to be playing the games. We know they're reporting on this tonight at our Next Star affiliate, WCMH, there in the middle of the Buckeye State. But that's not all, because how about Missouri? Let's go over to there. St. Louis, this is our affiliate, KTVI. Olympic soccer games coming to the great state of Missouri as well. New York, Nashville, San Diego, San Jose will also host Olympic soccer matches. According to the LA Olympics chief executive, these cities were chosen partially based on their premier Major League Soccer stadiums. So now that Olympic spirit might be closer to home. And if you're interested in going for the gold, by scoring tickets to one of those matches. Remember, it's a lotto system. Get the ball rolling by registering on the LA 2028 site by March. And if your number is called, you can buy the tickets. And if you want to invite me, happy to go. Elizabeth Vargas reports coming up next here on News Nation. She is following, of course, the hearing today for the accused Charlie Kirk killer, Tyler Robinson, in court. That hearing lasted for hours. She will be live at the courthouse with the very latest. That's coming up seconds away here on News Nation. I thank you so much for watching us tonight here on the Hill. This was the big story today in this town, Capitol Hill. They were able to end that partial government shutdown, but the next 10 days are going to be big. They're going to have to fund the Department of Homeland Security. We're here for it. I'm Blake. Elizabeth, it starts right now.